And at this point I want to introduce our guest speaker. His name is Daniel McGonigle. He happens to be the National Director of the Committees of Safety. I've known Dan for now several years, and Dan has been a very important person at the State House. When we do our distribution of material at the State House, we'd like to have Dan with us because he knows everybody. He knows all the faces of all the politicians there. I think when they see him, they probably turn the other way. Uh-oh. Here comes the man on the spot. It was 2 years ago. There was a very dangerous piece of legislation that passed the Massachusetts Senate. It was dealing with immunizations and mandatory inoculations and things of that nature. And the group Massachusetts Liberty Preservation Association, along with Dan, as a point man, helped defeat that very dangerous bill. It passed unanimously in the Senate, and by the time the House heard about it, it went nowhere. So Dan has, as you see, prepared a lot of interesting material. The topic is power of the purse and power of the sword. So let's give him a nice warm hand.
Thank you, folks. Before I get on my talk, I'd like to ask you all here a trivia question. And I asked that Hal and John Mack, let others first try to answer the question. Okay. I've got 3 posters here. It's hard for me being one-handed, but these are 3 posters, 2008, 2009, 2010, of the Boston Tea Party event at every annual event at Faneuil Hall in December. So, the question is, in the last 3 years, there's been an annual Boston Tea Party event in December at Faneuil Hall. Who is the only person who was a speaker at each of those 3 events? Raise hands. Go ahead.
The gentleman in front of me.
You are correct. You are correct.
Does he like a copy of those 2 books right there?
He can get
thank you.
He can get a free DVD. Absolutely correct. John, I get 3 color posters. I know you've got a scrapbook a mile high already, but they're here if you want. And okay. So congratulate John on that. And another piece.
They had me speaker because they didn't have to pay much for transportation for me to get there.
There you go. Another piece of trivia. This last one, 2010, on the initial flyers, John was not there, and so there were some of us on the event committee who fought for that, and we were successful getting John on there. Okay, as Al said, my name is Dan McGonigle, and first I want to apologize for reading from script. I'm not as talented as Jill Abbott and Hal are at reading off the cuff for 30 minutes, but so I apologize for that. But this is very important material, and I wouldn't attempt to speak off the cuff like an Edwin Vieira can do. This may or may not end up being just an intro to the subject matter, so I hope I can return periodically to this group and speak on it. After Hal asked me to speak on the subject matter, I used one of Edwin Vieira's documentaries titled Revitalizing the Militia Can Promote Monetary Reform. And I took Edwin's title of one of his commentaries on newswithviews.com, and I revised it, and I called this talk Revitalizing Constitutional Homeland Security Can Promote Monetary Reform. And then it was posted on Facebook, ended up being called Revitalizing Constitutional Homeland Security, and then Bill reposted it as on Meetup as Power of the Purse and the Power of the Sword. And I like that title because I'm limited to 30 minutes, and I want part of that, I want to explain exactly what those phrases mean for anybody here who doesn't know what they are. As I said, Edwin posts commentaries on newswithviews.com. And he's been publishing there since 2005, and he continues. His last commentary was late 2010. He's written many books, Imperial Judiciary, a novel called Crashmaker, Constitutional Homeland Security, Volume 1. I have 2 here available. These are the only books that are available if anybody wants to make a purchase. He's also published Pieces of 8, 2-volume set. This is a new reprint. You can go on newswithviews.com to his page where it lists all his commentaries, and near the top of his latest commentaries is an announcement where you can order this book directly from Edwin. And he hasn't published in the last 2 or 3 months because he's finishing up another book called Constitutional Homeland Security, Volume 2. The word I have, and I think John Max also, did you interview Edwin already for the New American? He's been working on Volume 2, and I understand that it's going to be, instead of different from Volume 1, it's going to be a hardcover, and it's going to be of this size, maybe 1,000 pages, maybe with 300 pages of footnotes. That's the word I have. And the reason I bring Edwin up, Edwin is he's an honorary chairman of committees of safety, and I actually am on the board, just recently been put on the board of committees of safety, advisory board of committees of safety, and I work closely with the founder, Walter Reddy, and so I'm going to be liberally quoting and paraphrasing Dr. Vieira. He is the preeminent expert on these 2 powers, the power of the purse and the power of the sword. I won't speak any more about what I've done in the past. Hal said enough on that. I will mention, though, that I have taken an undergraduate course in construction law in my studies at Wentworth. And no, I'm not an attorney. The vast majority of my knowledge of the Constitution, law, and history is self-taught. My analysis of the pandemic bill S-2028, which the bill itself itemized, well, in my analysis, itemized dozens of proposed violations of the Constitution. That analysis was never successfully challenged or rebutted, in part or in whole. So I think that helped the House up at the state, the House of Representatives up at the State House come up with a very, very different version than the Senate came up with. Committees of Safety is a First Amendment advocacy organization whose mission is to restore these 2 ancient powers. And by advocating to the people that they need to organize committees of safety from their neighborhood level and on up, and that the people need to actively lobby their state and local officials in these efforts. I did a search for Edwin on JBS's The New American Magazine website, and I came up with 18 hits, either where Edwin was quoted or he wrote an article in The New American. And as I mentioned before, and John has mentioned, there will be another article coming out by Edwin, and I believe the New American has plans on interviewing Walter Reddy, Hal, is that correct? No?
No commitment, I don't know.
Okay,
I'm not in on that part of it.
okay, all right, thank you. Here's a reprint that I use myself in educating people, published by the New American. It's a reprint of Edwin's article, A Crisis in Dollars and Cents. The dollar bills that were routinely exchanged for goods and services are not genuine Constitution dollars, but promissory notes substituting for the real thing. These are available up here. Now, back to the commentary that I mentioned earlier. Revitalizing the militia can promote monetary reform. This is a commentary published on newsreviews.com, written by Edwin. And what's interesting is that almost 3 years to the day before he first spoke at Faneuil Hall in 2008, he published this, December 12th, 2005. So we're talking about 6 years ago that Edwin was already publishing this material. I was first exposed to Edwin and John McManus and Walter Reddy in 2008 when I went to that event at Faneuil Hall. And I'm going to quote from the first paragraph from this article: revitalizing the militia can promote monetary reform. And maybe I should first mention that the word of militia has been demonized since the 90s by the media and by the government. Well, the fact of the matter is, this is a pocket constitution. It's one of my favorites, published by Young Americans for Liberty. I like this one because the clauses are numbered, and I'm always referencing sections, and it's easy, makes it really easy for me when the clauses are numbered in here, especially Article 1, Section 8, which has many clauses. Now, about the militia, it's mentioned 6 times. There's the well-regulated militia, there's the militia of the several states, Article 2, Section 2, well-regulated militia, Second Amendment, the militia mentioned once in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15. It's mentioned twice in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 16. And it's again mentioned in the Fifth Amendment. So I'm not one of those people who's afraid to mention the word. I think some state legislators introducing some Homeland Security bills are afraid to do that. And well, I believe in sticking to the words in the Constitution, so I'll leave that at that. Now, the first paragraph, I'm going to quote from Edwin, on revitalizing the militia can promote monetary reform. Political theory identifies the 2 greatest powers of government as the power of the purse and the power of the sword. Therefore, if any powers will serve, these 2 powers ought to be capable of being worked in tandem to save America from the greatest and most immediate danger facing her, namely, the collapse of the monetary and banking systems, or scams, if you prefer the language of hard-nosed, unabashed realism, that now plague this country. Now, Vieira, using strong language, he's advocating the restoration of sound money. Ron Paul has been advocating sound money for years. Also, what of security are we to do after a future financial collapse? Vieira addresses both these issues in detail from a constitutional perspective. What is sound money? Well, a person can hold sound money in their hand, and then they'll know what it is. They can drop it on a table. Here's a guide. to sound money. Anyone can order for free on the internet. I haven't read the whole thing, but you ought to know one of the sponsors is Freedom Works, and I think it's Dick Armey, former U.S. Senator. But I like the title, I like the subject. Honesty, integrity, consistency of worth, constitutional imperative. These and more are qualities that apply to sound money. Now, Edwin Vieira's book, Pieces of Eight, this new reprint, I'm going to quote about a short quote about sound money from the preface in his book. My goal has always been, namely, to educate the public on the legal, economic, and historical principles of sound money in order to promote the greatest degree possible freedom and prosperity for all. I am confident that this special edition will advance that goal. Edwin Vieira gives his address, September 27, day before my birthday, 2010. Okay, so now we know what sound money is, I think. But there's a lot of information out there. Ron Paul has spoken about it for a long time. My notes from watching a Vieira DVD. What is the power of the purse? It is the power to tax, the power to borrow, the power to spend, and the power with relation to money. The power of the sword, in its proper place, is constitutional homeland security. Edwin spells the power of the sword and constitutional homeland security out in his book, in his forthcoming books, volumes 1 and volume 2. The power of the sword is the militia of the several states and the well-regulated militia of the Constitution, as I mentioned earlier. Edwin says it is the ultimate power to enforce laws, by force if necessary. Now that comes from Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15, where it says the militia may be called forth to execute the laws. The power of the sword ultimately resides with the people. Well, how do we know this? And how do we know that it works? Well, we know from the Second Amendment, we know from history. The well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, I'm going to suggest that if I added a word after that comma, that it would still have the same meaning. And I'll read it again with my added word. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, therefore, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. My opinion on these two clauses, I call them two clauses, not four clauses, is in the past the courts have often argued the collective right versus the individual right. I think they're making the wrong argument altogether. My opinion is that both the collective right and the individual right apply. They both apply. And they apply together, and they go hand in hand like this. Like putting your 10 fingers together. That's why, and when I added the word therefore in between the two clauses, you might get a little more meaning to it, but we know that the founders in writing the Constitution used as few words as possible to get the exact meaning that they wanted to get for future interpretation. So, and Edwin has argued that, in his commentaries, that the Constitution before the Bill of Rights still guaranteed the individual right to keep and bear arms, even though it talks about the militia of the several states and the militia in Article 1, Section 8, Article 2, Section 2. So that's how we know that the power of the sword resides with the people from the Second Amendment perspective. How about the historical perspective? Well, Dr. Joseph Warren was chair of the Massachusetts Committees of Safety in the early 1700s. In the early 1770s. Sometime, it was created sometime after the Boston Massacre in 1770. And Hal has mentioned to me, I haven't seen it yet, but he's mentioned to me, I believe there's a brass plaque on a building in the north end, somewhere near Paul Revere's house. It's the recognizing the first meeting of the Committees of Safety. And I gotta go see that, we gotta take a digital photo of that. So, back to the historical perspective of why the power of the sword ultimately resides with the people. Dr. Warren, the chair, who had been appointed by the provincial Congress, which was the state legislature meeting outside Boston after the British Army and Navy had blockaded the harbor and took control of the city. The state legislature met outside. The Tory king-appointed governor was no longer relevant. What they did was the provincial Congress appointed the Massachusetts Committees of Safety to act as executive branch. They became the civilian commanders of the local militia, minute and militia units. Now, Dr. Joseph Warren, as the state chair, he did not order the Lexington Minute Company to report to the town green as the British regulars approached. He did not order the various militia and minute companies of Middlesex County to report to Concord. Those were local orders given by local leaders in the towns. So there is a historical perspective that the power of the sword, as Dr. Vieira says, ultimately resides with the people. So, this constitution structure is from the bottom up. I've been promoting through committees of safety online that people need to form their own neighborhood committees of safety associations at all levels, starting at their own street in their own neighborhood, as did Dr. Vieira publish in his 2007 book, Volume 1. The modern committees of safety and I are fully aware of the colonists' and the founders' success, and we believe and could successfully argue that the successful historical precedent must be followed for us to succeed today in taking back our republic, just as the Constitution must be followed to restore the republic, and I believe Dr. Vieira has before and would agree. I preach about sticking solid with the Constitution and history, as I did when I lobbied the state legislators against the pandemic bill in 2009. I never wavered. I stood on it, I analyzed it, here's the lobby sheet, I never wavered from it. Let your enemy, or be it your legal enemy, or your political enemy, or your economic enemy, let them say the Constitution does not apply. You stand solid on the Constitution. That's my argument. Therein lies the solutions in Constitution and history. Therein lies the backing and the method of winning the argument against those opposed, as I just said. Also therein lies the precedent that people, everyone, can grab onto and support. The instruction book for setting up structures, providing all levels and forms of security, has, and as I have said, already been written. It would be a mistake, in my opinion, to ignore historical success and to attempt to do it, name it, and to organize it differently, just as it is a mistake to ignore any part of the Constitution. The problem we have today is that the present Department of Homeland Security structure is from the top down, opposed to the Constitution structure, which is from the bottom up. The top-down DHS structure increases a police state structure, fails in providing security, safety, and protection, and increasingly tramples people's rights. I only need to mention one lesson to prove this top-down structure does not work. Hurricane Katrina and post-Katrina New Orleans. Now I'm going to go back to reading from Edwin's commentary, Revitalizing the Militia Can Promote Monetary Reform. And this will be the conclusion. Make no mistake about it. There will be monetary and banking crises in America, in America's not too distant future. And again, December 12, 2005. The monetary and banking systems are inherently unstable and inevitably and inexorably self-destructive. You can tell that Dr. Vieira has a great command of English language. The system's failure may be chronic, a long drawn-out degeneration, or it may be episodic, a series of sharp but relatively limited crises, or it may be even catastrophic, a single mammoth collapse. But fail they will. They being the banks. Also, make no mistake about it, the establishment will not reform the monetary and banking systems on its own initiative before a major crisis breaks out, for the simple reason that it cannot fashion a true reform of the present systems that will maintain its power over and profits from America's economy. I'll repeat that. For the simple reason that the establishment, cannot fashion a true reform of the present systems that will maintain its power over and profits from America's economy. Because rational economic calculation is impossible in a socialist economy and extremely difficult in a fascist economy, no workable reform of money and banking can come from the top down. Through the administrations, word beginning with M, administrations of politicians, bureaucrats, and the special interest groups that they serve. Rather, it must come from the bottom up, like the Constitution, through the free market. But the establishment cannot control a bottom-up free market reform, and there is zero likelihood that such a spontaneous popular reform would confirm the establishment in its position of economic dominance, which of course is why the establishment imposed on this country a system of central banking and fiat legal tender currency irredeemable in silver or gold in the first place. Now, current news regarding sound money and the power of the purse. I have here an article by Ralph Benko, member of State Bar in New York, Senior Advisor Economics American Principles Project. This is on CNBC, mainstream media. The title of the article is Gold, Estates, and Federal Monetary Policy. And he mentions at the bottom, so legislators in 12 states are exploring gold-based currency. It is reprehensible for national elites to deride those who are doing so. So he's basically agreeing, in mainstream media, agreeing with the implementation of sound money. And also, this article was reprinted all over the place on the internet. One place was the Gold Antitrust Action Committee, GATA, where they printed Ralph Banco, Gold Estates, and Federal Monetary Policy. To conclude, just one more paragraph. What is the antidote to the police state now being set up in this country? The only antidote is revitalization of the militia of the several states. I say again, the only antidote to a police state in this country is revitalization of the militia of the several states. And again, this is Vieira's commentary. Print out this page and save it, so when a police state has been set up, you can read it once more and realize that you knew the answer when there was still time, even if you did nothing about it, especially if you did nothing about it. In addition, revitalizing the militia of the several states may be the best way to begin reform of the monetary and banking systems before it is too late, and thereby avoid confrontation with a police state entirely. To begin reform before it is too late is the key insight. After the crisis reaches an advanced stage, more reform of existing institutions will not suffice. The only alternative will be reconstruction from scratch upon the rubble of a collapsed society. Where are we just seeing this now? In Japan. That is, if nothing is done soon, the precondition for change will be a financial and economic disaster. It will be necessary to see the country destroyed in order to save it. Then a desperate need for the militia will arise. Militia being we the people. The essence of strategy, however, is to avoid fighting pitched battles if victory can be attained by other means. If revitalized in time, the militia of the several states, and this is a phrase, Article 2, Section 2, the militia of the several states, could help to avert or could mitigate a monetary and banking crisis, and at least would be prepared to intervene when such a crisis breaks out. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
All right.